Hello everybody, this is GeneralJannis, and today I'm looking at if Blightlords are more viable in the Flyblown Host detachment. So with no further ado, let's take a look. So today, the 14th of December, Christmas fast approaching, and we see more and more detachments released for all the other armies. And also we had a balanced data slate and new points from 40k, but not many big changes for Death Guard. Basically, the biggest one is Deep Striking Mortarion. And as I said in this video, I'm focusing on the Blightlords in the Flyblown detachment because there was a lot of discussions in the Facebook forums now that a lot of people think that now Blightlords are more viable. So I'm looking at in this video I will be looking at their datasheet, weapon options, and then comparing the Flyblown and Plague Company detachments regarding damage, durability, and utility. And also, of course, we have to always consider the overall comparison with our other options, and that's of course the Deathshroud and the Plague Marines primarily. So we'll see how the Blightlords stack up. And of course, we have to keep in mind our two detachment options now. We have the Plague Company detachment and the Flyblown Host detachment, where if you select one or the other, you will be losing some things. I'll post the link here to my first video where I was reviewing those overall. So if you want to learn more, you can click the link. And a quick glance at the Blightlords datasheet, where we have our quite slow Terminators 4-inch movement, toughness 6, with a 4+ invulnerable save. Their weapons are a bit lackluster because most of them are damage 1, as you can see, and the AP is not very high, 0 or -1. And also, as we see, the Blight Launcher and the Spewer are also available to be carried by Plague Marine for a much lower point cost. 155 points for 5 models. I will not go into details here. So if you want more, I will put a link here to my more thorough Blightlords analysis that you can check out. And also very quick look here, their weapons. How would you equip a squad? So here you see all their weapons and the damage output each weapon can do across a variety of targets. And basically you see the combi bolter is better than the combi weapon for most of the targets, apart from elite infantry like Terminators and Blightlords or something like this. The Reaper autocannon is always a better choice than the poor Blight Launcher. Devastating wounds, sustained hits, and long range. So that's your preferred option, and much better also than the combi bolter. And the Plague Spear is better than that's also a good option, especially also good for Overwatch. And the Flail of Corruption is a better choice than the Bubotic Blade. But if you take this one, you don't get shooting from this Blightlord. So with this introduction out of the way, let's look at now what could enhance the damage output of the Blightlords. If we have the Detachment Plague Company, of course, selecting -1 save contagion, that would be quite strong for the Blightlords, as you will see. And also, if we have the Plague Company, we have some access to some good strats. So for the Ferric Blight, you can get more AP that also is needed for the Blightlords. The Sanguis Flux allows us in melee to give sustained hits 1 or 2 if you are close to an objective, which probably you would with your Blightlords. Sustained hits 2 is quite good for the Flail and the Bubotic weapons, and the Boil Blight is more for shooting. For 1 command point, your weapon becomes heavy. If you didn't move, you get +1 to hit, and you can ignore cover. So that also helps a little bit counteract the AP. If we go to the detachment, the new detachment, the Flyblown Host, we don't have anything generic in the detachment that helps the damage output. We don't have access to the -1 save contagion. Of course, we have the -1 toughness contagion. But there are some strats here also. Here we have the Droning Horror, rerolling once to hit or all to hit if we are in half range shooting. So if we are at 12-inch with our combi bolters and the Reaper autocannon and so on, we can be rerolling all to hit those weapons. The Plague Spear, of course, not really affected as it's auto hitting. The Eye of the Storm, you can use the strat if you are in engagement range and you're shooting, and then you can shoot with your weapons as if they were pistols. So that's can add a healthy stack of damage there. And we have the Enervating Onslaught, which is basically a tank shock for our infantry against other infantry and beasts, not vehicles and heavy stuff like that. But I was thinking that the Blightlords are quite big models. You have, let's say, 5 in a squad or 10, but how many realistically can get in engagement range after a charge? Maybe you get 2 or 3 of those. On a 4+, you deal mortal wounds, so maybe you would be getting 2, 3, let's say 4 mortal wounds tops on this. Poxwalkers only do it for a 5+, but with a smaller base, maybe you can stack a lot of them there. And also there is the enhancement of the droning chorus to give a leader that the squad they are leading has assault weapons. That would enable the Blightlords, for example, to advance and shoot their weapons also after advancing. And here, if we look at the Blightlords squad damage output, here I'm taking a mixed squad of 5 Blightlords with 1 Reaper autocannon with a spewer. We add the flail for melee damage, and the rest of the guys, just the two guys, have combi bolters for 155 points. If we see the baseline basically shooting at 12-inch here, what can they do versus a variety of targets? You can see, for example, 2 wounds shooting at 12-inch on Terminators wouldn't kill one of them. In melee, they can do a bit more. The fourth row here, you see the average versus infantry and vehicles. So the baseline shooting and melee, you can take out some guardsmen, some intercessors. You can do some damage to the Terminators. If you have the Flyblown detachment, if you add the droning horror, you can add more shooting damage at half range. You can see that's the third line here. The second line is the shooting 12-inch. If the enemy you're shooting is the closest, then you reroll once to wound. That's also quite good. And if you add the pistols stratagem, you would be adding the shooting damage if you are in engagement range. But you see on the bottom half of the table, if you have the Plague Company and you have selected the -1 save contagion, shooting the damage is increasing by 40-50%, and in melee you are increasing by 15-30% here the damage output. So for example, if we compare the melee damage in melee versus intercessors, that's 8 wounds, but if we have the -1 save contagion, we get 10, 11 wounds. So you get a healthy increase with a -1 AP. If you add the Ferric Blight and the Sangus Flux, assuming here sustained hits 2, you are doubling basically the melee damage output. So with a Plague Company, you have more opportunities to increase the damage. In general, you can see the Blightlord Terminators, they are better versus other infantry, not so strong and cannot do so much damage against things like a Land Raider or a Knight or other tanks and vehicles like that. Now looking at the durability and what enhancements can we give them depending on the detachment that we choose. If we have the Plague Company, of course, being able to choose -1 ballistic skill or weapon skill contagion, this will help the durability. This will always be active in melee attacks because the enemy will be in contagion range. And sometimes it will also help you in shooting, but not always from long range if there is no friendly unit nearby. And there are some stratagems in the Plague Company. You have the expensive 2 command point discussing resilience. In melee, the enemy enemy weapons are reduced in damage. This can be really strong and life-saving at some points. For example, if you're getting attacked by a lot of, let's say, power fist weapons or something like that. But of course, you need a lot of command points. And for 1 command point in shooting, you can give an enemy a unit stealth with Cloud of Flies. Of course, that will only help for 1 unit in the shooting. If we go at the Flyblown Host, of course, the detachment rule is to give stealth to all our infantry. So this is strong versus especially shooting armies. -1 to be hit from all the shooting. This doesn't help us in melee though. And in the stratagem, we also have the Mephitic Configuration. If we are close to a Mephitic Blightholder in the shooting phase, we can also be -1 to be wounded if the strength is higher than the toughness. So for the Blightlords, that would be above, let's say, if the strength is 7 and higher, and it's only working in shooting, and you need a Mephitic Blightholder, which is not, let's say, the most, the strongest unit that we have in our index. And then the enhancements, you could also think about the Plague Veil on the Blightlord leader. Then it cannot be targeted outside of 18 inch, and that could also, of course, increase the durability. So in this table we have the math for the Blightlord's durability. So here we see a variety of weapons, from light weapons like a Stormbolter up to heavy weapons like a Soul Shatter Cannon, and we can see in the table, this is not point corrected, how many of those weapons does it take on average to kill a Blightlord. So for example, in the first column here we have the Blightlord baseline. This is with no further enhancements or stealth or -1 ballistic skill, weapon skill, contagion. This is not taking into account cover either. But for example, here we see it will take 20 storm bolters at half range, or 7 heavy bolters, or 3 plague spewers to kill one Blightlord. And if we see that if the Blightlord is in the Flyblown contagion, or we use the Cloud of Flies for Plague Company, we have stealth. So then it will take, for example, 27 storm bolters or 4.5 assault cannons instead of, let's say, 3 assault cannons. So we see on the average that the stealth, of course, increases the durability versus shooting weapons, and most of the weapons here in my list are shooting weapons. You can see something like the Power Fist. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't help. The Flyblown or Cloud of Flies doesn't help versus a Power Fist. If we see the Blightlords in the Plague Company, when we have selected the plus the -1 ballistic skill or weapon skill contagion, then we also get the benefit for the melee weapons. If we have discussing resilience, you can see here that, of course, then it would also benefit, especially like a Power Fist or the the Freedom Hand. You can do something here, and then we see also if we have the Blightlords in the Flyblown detachment, and we have a Mephitic Blightholder, and we use the 1 command point for the strat, they are -1 to be wounded from, for example, the plasma gun, and the heavy weapons, of course, is much improved. -1 to be wounded here. Then we will be able to take, for example, 12 plasma guns instead of 7 in the baseline. So that can help versus the heavy weapons. Doesn't help so much, or doesn't help at all at low weapons, but you need to have the Mephitic Blightholder close by. Finally, comparing again Plague Company and Flyblown Host, what about the utility and the speed for the Blightlords? In the Plague Company, we are a bit constrained here. Either we can deep strike them, we can walk them up the field, the Blightlords, with their 4-inch move, or we can use an expensive Land Raider for 245 points. And the big advantage for the Flyblown Host is that there they get the Scout 5-inch move. So turn 1, we could walk them up the 5-inch Scout move, 4-inch normal move. We could also do an advanced roll, on average 3.5 inches more, so 12.5 on average. Otherwise, we'll be able to move 15 inch if we can get a 6 on our advanced roll. So that could make us put a Blightlord squad in the midpoint objective. They only have objective control 1, but we could move them up in the first turn. There are also some stratagems that are increasing, let's say, the utility. So, for example, the Vermin Cloud allows us to do a 6-inch piling and consolidation move. This could be an important extra movement for our Terminators. This, of course, goes for the Deathshroud as well. Instead of only 4-inch movement, if you can move a bit extra for the piling and the consolidation, you could steal some objective, or you can, free movement is always especially good for Death Guard. And then also, don't forget the nauseating paroxysms stratagem, where we force the enemy to do a battle check in the beginning in the fight phase at -1 leadership. This could enable the Blightlords to keep an objective, maybe, putting the enemy at objective control 0, or we can steal an objective from the enemy. So, of course, a big advantage here for the Flyblown Host. So comparing now the Plague Company or the Flyblown Host for the Blightlords, of course, if you are really looking into damage, it's clear that the Plague Company has the strongest potential. You have better strats, you have the -1 save contagion. For durability, it's quite similar. The Flyblown Host, in my opinion, has a better advantage versus shooting armies. You wouldn't know, of course, what you would be facing when you take the list, But the Cpmpany has a stronger durability potential in melee with a -1 weapon skill, and also you have the discussing resilience that could help, especially for the sturdy Terminators here. But again, something like a Tau army or something like that, firing line, I think stealth overall is better to have. And then the big advantage of the Flyblown is in the utility and the speed. The scout move makes us be able to place the Blightlords where they need to be, and also we can, we have some more to advance and take and hold some objectives. But of course, the big question when you talk about Blightlords is how do they compare to the other infantry alternatives we have. This leads us to the last table of this video, the overall per point comparison of our infantry options. We have the Blightlord Terminators, the Deathshroud Terminators, and our Plague Marines. And here we have point corrected the damage and the durability. And you can see here, this is the average damage versus across the GeneralJannis targets that you have been seeing in the previous tables, point corrected, as I said. Here we have the squad of the 5 Blightlords with 1 Reaper autocannon, a spear, a flail, and combi bolters. Here you see the damage at 24-inch, 12-inch, and melee on average. I also included a squad of more shooting-oriented Blightlords where you don't have the spear and the flail, so that's more a long-range distance. And here we also have the durability index. This is across the weapons that you saw in the previous table, and the index 100 is indicated by an intercessor for light weapons or a rhino for heavy weapons. So here we see the Blightlords. They have quite good durability versus the light weapons per point, better than the Deathshroud and the Plague Marines here, so 175 instead of 156 and 110 for Plague Marines. For heavy weapons, the Deathshroud, they have the advantage because they have innate ability to be for heavier weapons that they are -1 to be wounded. And we see, but if we look at the damage, we see that the Deathshroud Terminators have much higher damage output in melee, 6.2 wounds on average here instead of 3, around 3 for the Blightlords. If we look at, they are not as good at the shooting, the Deathshroud, but their melee damage output is much higher. If we look at some squad of Plague Marines here, we have, if we make a very, let's say a mixed squad, we can get better damage output at shooting and melee than the Blightlords. We can do also long range shooting with blight launchers, plasmas, and bolters. Then they are better at long range shooting than the Blightlords. And if we can do a more melee oriented squad with let's say bubotic weapons and heavy plague weapons, then we have also much higher damage output, 5.4 wounds here than the Blightlords. Not as good as the Deathshroud, but the Plague Marines are more versatile. You can make the squads more versatile to your needs. You can also see in this table I've added, if we add some leaders like the Lord of Violence or Lord of Contagion for these different squads, and I've added Biologus or Tallyman here for the various Plague Marine squads. And basically the numbers are shifting a bit, but it doesn't change, let's say, the relative ranking that the Deathshroud and Plague Marines can do much higher damage. So reaching to the summary and final thoughts, the Blightlords still struggle per point, at least the damage, versus if you compare them to Deathshroud and Plague Marines. Their durability is higher for lighter weapons, and in the Flyblown Host, it could give Blightlords more durability also versus heavier weapons. If you have a Memphitic Blightholder close by, you have a better potential to walk them up the board and sit on an objective. Maybe advancing them could be like some niche use where you can advance a big squad behind a screen of poxwalkers. Maybe you add a leader with a plague veil so that it's difficult for the enemy to come close and take them out in melee, trying to hold the middle, but that squad is also quite expensive. So all in all, the Flyblown, as I see it, could be a niche for the Blightlords. It helps them against if you're facing shooting armies. You can do some shenanigans, but the Blightlords themselves are still struggling versus Deathshroud and Plague Marines. So what so this concludes the video. What do you think about this analysis? Let me know in your comments. Let me also know if you have some suggestions for other videos. And thanks everybody for the kind comments of me getting back online. It's really nice to read. I'm looking forward to making some more videos in the up to Christmas and in the new year. So with these words, GeneralJannis signing out. Stay safe out there, and bye bye.